Hi, if you're curious about the new 2023 labor law changes in California that will impact your restaurant, then stick around and I'll cover it all in less than 30 minutes. Hi, my name is Celeste Young-Ramos. I'm a restaurant expert in operations and human resources in Los Angeles, California, and I'm the founder of Restaurant Success Center, where we specialize in management training to help them become better managers, retain more employees, and make more profits. You could say our mission is your success. So the first thing we're going to start off with today is the state minimum wage increase. I thought the state minimum wage, according to all the posters that I saw, we were going to land at $15 an hour here at January 1st. But lo and behold, the state minimum wage is now $15.50 per hour for all employers, no matter whether you're a small one under 25 or less or 26 or more. Everyone has the same minimum wage. And you may ask, why did it go such a high increase? For some of you, you're actually taking $1.50 an hour jump if you were a small employer. Well, the reason is in the legislation, there was a clause stating that inflation exceeded 7%, then it would trigger this increased minimum wage with a price index, and that it would be universal to all employers. So that's why it's happened. Now, there still are 19 other cities throughout the state that have even a higher minimum wage. For example, here in Los Angeles, ours is $16.04. These 19 cities often take their minimum wage increases in the middle of the year in July. So if you're not sure where you fall, we will have a link down below that you can click on it to check out what is the minimum wage that you should be offering in your city. Now, also, whenever we have a change in minimum wage, it also affects our exempt salaries. So these are salaries that you might have for managers or supervisors where you're trying to get around the overtime and break policies. So that's why they call it exempt from overtime and breaks. So whenever there's a change, it does cause an increase in the formula. So at this time, all of your salaried managers should be receiving no less than $64,480 per year. The formula is 2 times the state minimum wage, so that would be $21 an hour, $31 an hour times 2 times 40 hours a week. No matter whether they work 40 hours, 50 or 60, it's always calculated by the 40-hour a week number. So please make sure that you've adjusted their salaries as well. Now, last year, we started hearing about the Fast Food Recovery Act, AB 257. It actually was signed in effect on Labor Day of 2022 by Governor Newsom. And how this law got introduced at all is because there was a study conducted where 85% of California fast food workers claimed to be victims of wage theft. And the areas where they saw the most theft were 59% reported denial of sick pay. And I can kind of agree with that, because as I'm going through and doing audits of some of my clients' restaurants, I'm finding that many of them have not been providing sick leave pay, which is mandatory for the state, 3 days or up to 24 hours. Secondly, 27% reported violations in overtime and minimum wage, and 53% had reported having their rest breaks withheld or interrupted without prior compensation or proper compensation. And if an employee misses either a 10-minute break or a 30-minute meal period, they're supposed to be paid a full 1 hour pay for that missed time. So that's why it's very important that we follow up and really manage those breaks. As we've been seeing a lot in PAGA lawsuits, Private Attorney General Act lawsuits that have been plaguing the restaurant industry, sometimes, we try to avoid not paying that break when we could have been paying them their minimum wage, if that's their wage, and not end up paying like $300 in violations, because that's usually what happens. You get nailed for $100 penalty for not paying the break, then you get nailed for not having it properly written on the check and nailed for not paying them on time. So it's always best to have a practice of compensating them for those mixed breaks, whether it's an automatic program that you have in your payroll system, which I see with many payroll companies, but we want to make sure they get their fair breaks. So the Fast Food Recovery Act, some of the provisions were that for fast food and counter service restaurants, like restaurants where you come up and order from the register and they bring it out, or you come up and pick it up, they'll be affected only if they have 100 units. So this is going to really hit more of those franchise larger chains. But as we know, everything that hits the large chains trickles down and hits the small people too in the end, because we're trying to compete for the same employees. And with this 10 member council that they're putting in effect, they have, one of the abilities is to set all the wage and hour laws for that instead of it having to be state legislated. And one provision is that they can take the minimum wage up to $22 an hour, which is just like a tremendous amount of money, right? We're going to have to definitely, if that passes, pass those charges along to our customer. So people were kind of upset about this, and 1 million people actually got behind it, signed a petition to block it, and now it's being forced on the California state ballot in 2024. Now, also this year on the 1st of January, if you have 15 or more employees, you're required to provide wage and salary ranges to a variety of different people. 1 is to current employees, 2 is to any applicant that applies for a job, and you also must include these ranges in your job postings. Now, if you just have, like, for instance, often servers only get minimum wage because they're getting compensated by the rest of their tips, right? So if you only have a set wage for a job position, that's fine. You don't have to list a range. But as like for cooks, sometimes you might have someone starting in a lower range and having a little bit wider range. You'll now need to put that on your job listings instead of saying compensable to experience, or saying competitive wages. It's also requiring employers to keep records of the job titles and wage histories for each employee during their employment, plus 3 years after their employment ends. So non-compliance for failing to follow these rules here will be $10,000 fine. Now, if you have 100 or more employees, you will be required to publish the mean and median wages and salaries and other demographic info for a variety of positions. This will be on a government website. I'm not going to go into great detail here because most of the people that I service are small businesses. But if you need more information on this, you can go to SB 1162, the pay scale publication. IRS also increased the reimbursement rate. It is now 65.5 cents per mile driven for business use. Another reimbursement that we've seen become a trouble spot for businesses, particularly in PAGA lawsuits, is reimbursement for phone activity. If you're using phone apps to communicate schedules or questions, or use that as a primary way for people to request time off, etc., then you're going to need to start paying them for some phone reimbursement, because that's an expense that they're having to acquire because of how you want to manage the business. Now, there is a strategy to get around that, and that is if you're only offering that as a sense of convenience for the employees. So instead of coming in and filling out your time clock in the restaurant, you can do it on your phone, or do those requests on your phone instead of filling out a paper inside the restaurant. So if you want to get around having to pay that, you do need to have in your handbook that these apps are just a means of communication as convenience to the staff. You need to post the information that you would be sharing on these apps in the restaurants where employees can see them, maybe in the employee break area or someplace where it's a normal place that employees are going to visit and see notices. and then have a way for them to physically be able to do the activity that you're wanting them to do, whether it's clocking out or filling out requests. Okay, so typically, phone bills have gotten quite small. Now you can get a phone for 25 bucks, sometimes 50 bucks. So you would just need to decide what you feel is a reasonable accommodation. If their bill's like 40 bucks a month and they work for you 40, 50 hours a week as a manager, then perhaps paying half their phone bill would be a good amount if both of you agree upon it, and if they're using the phone quite excessively. I do want to caution you about using text messages on the phone. I got put on one restaurant's, that's a 24-hour restaurant, their text message chain. Oh my gosh, the amount of calls or emails and texts that came across that phone was just downright annoying. And they would often want the managers to respond to those messages immediately. And if that's what's happening, then they need to be paid for that time. So if you do send some kind of message over a text and they're off duty, if it's not an emergency, then you need to put on that they can respond to it when they return to work. Now let's go over the California Family Rights Leave, AB 1041. There was some recent changes to who can be covered under this leave. Eligible employees can take unpaid job-protected leave to care for designated persons under the California Family Rights Act. And they can use paid sick leave to care for those designated persons under the California Healthy Workplace, Healthy Family Act of 2014. So the paid leave is not paid by you. They can apply for it through the state of California. They do have up to 12 weeks to care for family members, where you have to save their time, their job, the pay. Everything has to be comparable to when they left. They have changed it, though, to broaden the amount of people that can be covered. Before, it was like parents, siblings, direct line family relationships, in-laws, grandparents, etc. They have now included someone to be as a designated person that's a non-blood relative. So, for instance, maybe they have a roommate that lives in their same apartment that now has COVID or something that needs care. They can take time off for that person. They do have to designate the person, and they can only have one designee a year, as long as you have that in your employee handbook. So if you have that in your employee handbook, then they can't like choose George and then Sally and 4 or 5 different roommates and spend a whole year off of work taking care of these different people. Also, California now has an bereavement leave if there's been a death in the family. This went into place as of January 2023. It covers employers of 5 or more. So now they have up to 5 days of leave for people who have a qualifying family member pass away. These are all immediate family, such as spouse, child, parent, sibling, grandparent, grandchild, domestic partner, or parent-in-law. The employees have to have been employed with you for at least 30 days when they want to take the leave, and they have up to 90 days to take the leave. So they might take a few days off near the death and the funeral, and maybe later they need to take off some time to help with some issues with the family estate. They could take those days separate. There are no limit of leaves per year, but of course you can ask for proof. We've all had one employee over our careers that's had the same father die 3 times. So you do have the option to ask for proof. Now, there's been some changes to the COVID-19 reporting rules through AB 2693. And now if you have a case of positive COVID that's been reported to you, you don't have to have a written notice provided to every single person at the work site. Now you can place a notice on the payroll portal or post a flyer where you normally communicate messages to your staff, and you just have to have that message posted within 24 hours notifying everyone of the exposure. You also no longer have to report illnesses for COVID-19 to the health department within the 48-hour time frame. So that does free you up from some extra reporting. Also, we had Emergency Conditions Law, SB 1044. This one effective in January as well. And this prohibits retaliation against an employee for refusing to report to work or leaving a place of employment during a natural disaster or criminal event. So we are required to allow employees to make phone contact with their families during these types of events. And if they feel that their safety is at risk, they are allowed to leave the building. So I do think you need to put into place some kind of directions in your handbook to explain this policy so that it's very clear to your employees. The next one I'm going to talk about is the protections for off-site, off-duty marijuana use, AB 2188. So as you know, state of California does allow off-duty marijuana use. So a bill has been passed, but it doesn't go in effect until January of 2024. And this bill amends the Fair Employment and Housing Act. It prohibits employers for discriminating against applicants and or employees because they have used cannabis off the job and away from the workplace, were found to have a non-psychoactive cannabis metabolites in their hair, blood, urine, or other bodily fluids by a drug screening test. But you can still do drug testing or have a drug-free workplace. You just have to make sure that it's properly noticed to all the employees at hire and that it's included in your employee handbook. I wanted to remind everyone that the state of California does require you, if you have 5 or more employees, to have a retirement savings program for your employees. The state realizes that there probably will be a deficit in Social Security funds for many employers and their employees in their advanced years. And so they're wanting to encourage the employees to start contributing to the program so that they're properly protected during their elder years. So there is a state program called CalSavers. You can use that, or you can set up an independent retirement program through an insurance company that can administer it for your company. You're not required to do an employer match. You're just required to have the ability for employees to take deductions in their paycheck toward these funds. If you decide to go with CalSavers, it is a free program. You just have to notify them within 30 days of all your new hires. CalSavers will send out those employees the enrollment information. If the employee fails to do the enrollment or they opt out of the program, they will be automatically having 5% of their wages each pay period reduced or deducted out toward the savings plan. These funds do follow them, so if they quit the job, they'll have these funds available to them. Now, previously, if you were an employer and you had one employee, you could, as a sole proprietor or a self-employed person or a person that was like an S Corp, also participate in this program. However, there's been a change and those people are no longer allowed to participate. You can still, though, contact an insurance agency to set up a policy for yourself if you'd like to take advantage of that. Now, this is going to continue to phase in as of June 30th of 2022. All companies with 5 or more needed to sign up. As of December 31st of 2025, all employers with 1 or more employees will be required to have their company enrolled in a program. I also wanted to remind you about the employee retention credits. The program has been in place for a couple of years, but there are some deadlines that you need to make if you'd like to still participate. So the program is an IRS tax credit for businesses for payroll quarters in 2020 and 2021 that were severely damaged from COVID-19. During 2021, you could actually get $26,000 per employee That's excluding the amount that you paid out in PPP wages. You do have an opportunity to go back if you haven't applied for those as they occurred. You can go back and amend your payroll taxes up to 3 years. So this second quarter is the first quarter that would hit the 3-year mark. So if you haven't applied already, you want to make sure in the second quarter that you're prepared to do that. You can approach your payroll company to see if they will process the 941s and 940s for you, because you have to go back and amend those. Or there's a lot of companies online that if you just Google employee retention credits, there's a lot that will pop up. You'll want to check to see how long they've been in business and also what fee that they're charging to do this processing. The fees are not upfront. They're usually paid when you do get the refunds. Refunds are taking about 6 months to be processed. But it is something that you're eligible for. Possibly it's not like a grant where you had to compete against a lot of other people to get some funding. And also I wanted to remind you that there have been quite a few changes in the labor law posters, state and federal, over the last few years, 18 to be exact. And of course, this year we saw a big difference in the minimum wage to $15.50, and most of the charts out there say $15. So it would be a very good time to get those updated. All right, folks, that's all I have to share with you today. I hope you found this information helpful. We've put a link down below with reference to all of these laws that I talk about if you'd like to look at them a little bit further. And of course, if you'd like to receive any help from us in regards to these situations, you can always contact us at restaurantsuccesscenter.com. Thank you very much and have a sparkling day. Bye-bye.